Earth Debate, Uncut, and After Show. I'm your host, Nathan Oakley, and if you are new to this channel, or you've not done so already, then be sure to subscribe, hit the bell notification icon and join button if you'd like to become a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member and keep up to date with the Flat Earth Debate. If you would like to support the channel, there is a super chat that runs alongside each of these shows while they premiere, and there's also a Ko-Fi or Coffee, Patreon, crypto and thanks button in the info box below the video. Speaking of Patrons, I'm going to do a quick shout out to all of you who do support me on Patreon. So, a massive shout of thanks and appreciation to Amish Earther, Naughty Thumbnails, Mitch Kennedy, Original D Rose, Rod, The Name's Burley, Todd Wazzle, Jason Hornsby, Christoph Fournier, Flat Earth Travolta, J Mel's 24, Unimento, M Iron 26, Endless, Flat Earth Sage, Golden McKiernan, Retro Bill, Level Plain Poem, Cannabear, Fibre Oats, Michael Kahn, John Kays, Patrick Gunnels, Banter, Mel B. Styles, Hairy Blade, Mobile Max 777, Rob W, Reese Pound, Del West Watson, Maria Elands, Unbelievable Productions, Blue Ridge Ranger, Abraham Mohammed, Skeptic 936, Life is Short, Texas Mike, Tina Baker, David Wayne Foster, and Dank. So another massive thank you to all of you for supporting me on Patreon. And now I will hand over to whoever is in Discord and Google so you can enjoy their dulcet tones while I set up for today's live show.
Because I still remember film. Like my brother had a Canon film camera, 35 millimeter, and it's like a pain in the ass to like the digitals, the controls in there were somewhat automated, so it made focusing and all that stuff easier, and it would also compensate for the exposure. Some decent quality images, but almost nobody uses film anymore except for crazy people. Everybody's gone digital. Everybody's gone digital, but digital has its own problems as well. So,
are you saying you use film still?
no. And it's the same thing with like astrophotography. They used to use glass plates in astrophotography, and now they've all moved to digital sensors because they can super cool the sensors to make them more efficient. So they use like liquid nitrogen to super cool them. Gets them more sensitive than the any kind of potential photographic plate could be.
Right. Didn't help but think of Terminator 2 when you said liquid nitrogen. Right. I googled what's the difference between OLED screens and HDR TVs, and they said not that much. Just going by a quick Google search, obviously, because a lot of people are bragging about these OLED screens.
Yeah, the OLEDs, like I said, they can be stacked. You can get red, green, and blue on the same pixel. But again, their lifespan is not as great as LCD or LEDs.
Okay, so then it's just better to get an HDR TV then, from what you said, because it's kind of like similar thing too. The colors are way, way, way better.
No.
Yeah, you get
No,
an
no.
HDR that can do 10-bit or 12-bit color.
HDR's got nothing to do with the actual technology of the panel, though, has it? It's just it's like a processing technology as opposed to a pixel technology.
I think it's pixel.
HDR?
Yeah, because
is color space.
That is
what
actually
that?
down to the technology in the pixel itself, in the individual self-reach pixel.
Oh, Well, what I noticed is when I when I have the resolution on a game I'm playing that takes advantage of HDR, if I set it to 4K maximum resolution, the colors aren't as popping. If I turn it down to 1080p, the colors are like really popping. Like they look amazing.
Okay.
So it seems like the more pixels you use, the less they have for colors, and the less pixels you use, the more those pixels could be used for colors. If that
That's
makes sense.
processing, isn't it? I thought that's what I mean. I thought that had everything to. My understanding is certain panels can do HDR and some can't. This particular one I've got, which is a very cheap 4K panel, does happen to do HDR with a very low number attached, right? But I just thought that meant it accepted the technology, like accepting a HDMI 2.1 connection or something, as opposed to no, there's got to be something inherent in the actual cells themselves that make it work. But by the sounds of what you're saying, no, you've got to have something inherent to the actual technology of the pixel itself to make it work.
Well, I was just guessing. Let's just ask what Rayleigh says. Is that how it goes? How does it work?
Yeah, the HDR just means that you can add more color information to the signal.
Yeah, so it's
So you have
nothing
a
to do with the panel then. So it's in essence any as long as you can accept the processing information pre-presentation on the panel itself, any panel could do HDR, right?
as long as the panel has a good CRI, so it has the ability to display like all that color range.
Yes, I was going to say, but not. Yeah, okay, I'll agree with that too. It's like saying, well, you could slip this V12 engine into any car. Well, yeah, but it might break apart at 200 miles an hour because it hasn't got the right aerodynamics. Yeah, but you could literally stick this engine in any car and you can stick a HDR signal into any panel, but for the fact that it might not actually be able to reproduce that color range. Yeah, okay, I get that. But what I'm saying is it's not inherent to the technology because when you were describing things like OLED versus LED and mini LED and all the other different technologies, they're fundamentally different in terms of how they're presenting something with the panel or how they backlight more likely, in sections or for individual pixels. And those things all make a massive difference when you compare them side by side with the same signal. I mean, with or without HDR is kind of like, to me, yeah, it's an added bonus on top when it works because I have seen HDR working really, really well, but it doesn't. It sort of pales in comparison when you compare different panel types. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Not
exactly.
me.
From old TN panels to what we've got now with OLED, it's just night and day. And with high refresh rates, the difference is just night and day, in my
Yeah, my
opinion.
TV only has the refresh rate of 60.
Again,
I said my TV, HDR TV, only has 60 refresh rate.
but presumably it can do higher.
What?
Can the monitor do higher than 60?
No, that's what I meant. It's
That's the only thing I would concern myself with. I am completely colorblind, so the color accuracy is kind of irrelevant to me. But the
right. Well,
intensity and contrast and things like that definitely make a big difference. And refresh rate, of all the things that I've sampled in terms of technology from monitors, going from 60 hertz to 120 hertz, not so much beyond that, if I'm honest. Yeah, it does make a difference, but it's diminishing returns, right? But just that one jump from a 60 hertz monitor to 120 hertz or even 100 hertz, but realistically 120, 140, there or thereabouts and above. If you're starting where you are at 60, the difference is massive and really obvious immediately.
right. That's what I'm looking to get next. Like, was to be a higher refresh rate because I remember back in the 90s during the 32-bit gaming era, it was like between 20 and 30 frames per second. Then when we got like to 60 frames per second, I was like, oh wow, what a jump. So
It's
now I'm
only in
excited about the jump from 60 to 120.
only in recent years though people don't appreciate it because it's sort of the norm. It's become the norm really quickly because it's so much better. People have immediately gone, yeah, well, I'll definitely have that and I won't go back.
Peop-
So the sort of only when I bought the last graphics card for the last computer, 980, back then, the standard, if you were like, got the best of the best, you were pissing in the wind if you were trying to get 4K. That was a dream. But if you could achieve 1080p at 60 frames per second, that was the PC gaming experience because console gave you 30 frames per second. So you're getting a better, smoother experience with 60. Now,
That's what I was going to say. What's holding back people not appreciating higher frame rate was basically the consoles, because the consoles lagged behind so much. They were usually at 30 for the longest time. Only just now they're getting into 60. So because of that, people didn't know what they were missing.
yeah,
So that's why they didn't appreciate it. Like you said,
but
people
even
don't
then,
appreciate it.
the difference between 60 to 120 is a massive, massive difference. So on some of the games I play, when I click away from them, because I play everything windowed just in case I want to play it on the stream. Well, when I do that, you click away and it will drop the refresh rate to either 60 or 30 frames per second. So you can immediately see the difference as soon as you click away from the screen, because it's suddenly presenting it at 30 or 60 frames per second. And you're like, my God, it looks really awful. And you can obviously just set it manually to whatever frame rate you like. And I've done that. And it just isn't, there's no comparison. There really isn't. But, I'm sure people who've got better colour vision than me would argue for the colour accuracy, especially if you're dealing with. That reminds me, I watched a video from a guy who was doing like picture editing at the high end. So it's obviously professional stuff with really expensive computers and high end workflows. And he's doing it, and every so often he said he was getting criticised that stuff that was just supposed to look great was coming back to him from his higher ups going, this is awful. This is completely wrong. The facial colour balances are all wrong. How has this gone so wrong? And he'd be like, I don't know, I'll just address it. And he fixed it and he would go back. But then one day he comes across a colourblind test and failed it and didn't know he was colourblind. Now, bearing in mind that he's done this after getting quite high up in a career that literally depends upon him being able to see colour, but he's still in the job, which I thought was very amusing. Now, for me, when I was doing electronic servicing, so I partly did courses on electronic servicing through college and knew my limitations, but they were training you with sort of the modern, up-to-date wiring colours, which was fine, and I did quite well. But as soon as I went into an actual job where I had to do anything, I got to a 1970s amplifier and suddenly everything's the same colour inside. And you think you can see the different colours until it goes bang. And then you realise, no, this is probably not something I should be doing. I'm gonna blow more things up than I fix, aren't I? And in the case of this guy doing the picture accuracy, he said it wasn't a massive problem, but I'm like, I've got the same colour deficiency as you have, and I know how limited I am. But fair enough, if you're working in that industry and you can still churn out decent enough work that people look at and go, yeah, that looks nice, then it doesn't matter. You know what I mean?
Well, I was just eating food, so yeah, sure. I was paying attention.
Just don't
Hey,
spend a fortune is my advice on monitors. The technology moves on really quickly. They're really flimsy, even if you buy an expensive one. They're just made of cheap plastics. Like you can buy a Samsung Odyssey thing, and I've seen these giant curved monster tellies that cost a couple of grand, PC monitors rather, and that's just the same flimsy crap they've always been. It's the same with projectors. Doesn't matter if you spend 10 grand on one; they're still made of flimsy plastic.
all right. I was thinking of changing the subject really quickly. Since I wasn't there yesterday for yesterday's show, could you give me like the cliff notes, the short version of what happened yesterday's show?
Uh, I don't remember what happened on yesterday's show. We went to Earth Awakenings.
Yeah, yeah. Well, did you enjoy yourself? Did you have a good time? Like the people you talked to, was it a good conversation, and so forth and so on?
As far as I can remember,
Oh,
which
that's
is
good.
basically nothing. I can't even remember what I did yesterday.
Really?
Yeah, pretty much. We're at
Mm.
what, 2000 and how many shows? They all blur into one.
Yeah, I guess so. I
I
guess so.
edit out stuff, so because I will forget, for the AMA, I intentionally went through and time-stamped lots and lots and lots of individual questions that I wanted to trim out. There was loads of them that were really good questions that I felt were worthy of individual clips. So having that in mind before it gets lost in a field of millions of other shows, I went back to it today and trimmed out about 10 or 15 clips, and I'm not even halfway done. So that was my way of remembering on that day there's this show, because I've got in my photo album all the screenshots of the timestamp numbers that I need to go to get those videos. So I got up about stupid o'clock this morning. Like, you can tell when I'm really poor, when I'm churning out videos like endlessly. That's when I'm really poor. So I was up at 5 a.m. editing these videos. And when the kids got up long after I was editing videos, they're like, "Daddy, can you do this?" "No, got a mortgage to pay. Got to make more videos. Leave me alone." So that's been my day. But on the upside, for the members, there is a load of videos, but they'll obviously not get released immediately to the public. I'll trickle them out over time and make some nice thumbnails for them. But many of them were only, 1 or 2 minutes long. So some of them even managed to get condensed down to being short videos, less than 60 seconds, to have a full Q&A, like a full self-contained question and answer. So I was quite pleased with the ease that I was getting it rattled through, to spend maybe, I don't know how many hours I spent doing it, but a significant chunk of the morning and get maybe 10 or 15 videos out of that. Very productive morning, which is good because I'm poor. So hopefully that'll generate some revenue. We'll see.
Well, that's good that the AMA helped you out with the revenue and stuff like that. We can, I don't know, eventually set up another one, talk with those boys and see what they want.
Yeah, well, I've got a
And,
wealth of material to like I say, to work my way through, which is the only really, light at the end of the tunnel in this regard. The fact that I have got something I can actually generate some revenue with. I've got some material to be working with. So as much as, yes, I do want to go out and do another AMA or go to the other 24/7 Discord or politics again, and indeed Earth Awakenings again, for the time being, I've got enough to be working with, and because it's good stuff already, I don't want to be like, well, let's get on to the next really good thing and just forget the quality of that AMA. I've had so many positive comments about it, which reaffirms my notions that it's good enough to be trimming it out and making it into lots and lots of short little videos, which I am doing. So yeah, once I've got my way through that, it might take me a month. If it does, then maybe we'll go back to politics server in a month's time and ask, do you want to do it again? Or do you want to do something similar? Or do you want me to just pop into your room? Whatever. But
okay.
yes, definitely.
All right, that's good. Yeah, it seems like the AMA was the most popular out of them all. And we actually were hoping that it was a big success. Go on.
You could also make a coffee table book. I don't know if you guys got that shtick over in England, but in America we got these things called coffee table books, which are you put on your little table in your living room. They're about just intriguing topics, nothing too deep. You could put it as like, "Is this coffee table flat?" That's the title of the book. I'd buy it.
Sorry, I was eating. Yeah, I was thinking of Seinfeld when you said that. Kramer comes up with a coffee book.
Yeah. So when you open up the book, it says, before you picked up this book, it was laying on the table, horizontal and flat. Now you might say, no, it wasn't flat, because the table actually has striations and pores and microscopic deviations. But then I would say, you're stupid. Clearly, this table is flat and this book is flat.
If I get a general average of the undulations and imperfections of the book cover, and then with that average describe how high or low those undulations are with respect to the average of the book cover, I can then show how flat it isn't with how flat it is.
Yep.
I'm
Oh,
glad
that
you got.
reminds me. Did you talk to Bacon yesterday on that place? Or sorry, were you going to say something?
Oh, there you go. There's a reminder of what we did yesterday. Yeah, we converted some guy called Bacon to being a flat earther, and he had to, as is the case, and he will become the first poster child for this method, had to concede that he's measuring Earth flat, because he was, and there's no other way of describing it. So at the end of the process, push come to shove, So you concede Earth's measured flat? Yes. Will you repeat that? Earth is measured flat. I am now a flat earther. End quote. Bacon.
I wouldn't trust that quote.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
It's
If
a
someone's
little,
disingenuous when they concede and there is no getting around the concession, I will take a feigned, sarcastic, high-pitched, well, I'm a flat earther then. Yeah, you are. Doesn't matter how much your tone changes the intonation of what you're suggesting when you sarcastically profess to being a flat earther, when you've just conceded it's measured flat, which is what he did. I keep telling the audience, and I hope they take heed, when you know that it is measured flat, you will then have, for want of a better term, the balls on you to tell your opponent how their claim will require a flat earth to be measured at some stage. Now, the more you do it, the more you'll realise that there's every opportunity to do it almost immediately with every example of a globe claimed to be proofsy that they'll offer you. But that takes confidence, and that confidence comes from knowing it's measured flat, that there's no getting around it in any circumstances. Now, for me, I now find amusement is in when I don't spot them and someone around me spots them and I go, damn, why did I spot that earlier? Instead of going into this endless waffle about how Earth's not spherical or something similar, when I could just be pointing out how their example needed a flat Earth. So it just amuses me in terms of my own ignorance. Obviously, we're early days in terms of always taking the opportunity to point out how an example that's claimed to prove a globe, rather than how it falls apart on logical consistency, aka it's a fallacy, point out how their example required a flat Earth to make the claim every time. And then you'll get people like Bacon saying, well, yes, I have to measure flat to give you this example. Now, prior to 2024, without us trying to induce it, Conspiracy Cats did it of his own volition. Well, I'll give you a flat Earth for this angle measurement. Yeah, you damn well have to. It's going to be measured. Well, it's going to be flat. So you'll have to, give it to us like it's some, oh, well, aren't I generous giving you this flat Earth I have to measure? Yeah, they do. Just have to know that at the point of the argument, and you'll get people like Bacon all day long conceding to their argument requiring Earth to be flat because their argument requires it to be flat. It is that simple.
Oh, all right.
I hope we get this message across and we see it permeate throughout the community. People start changing their tune, stop babbling on about nonsense they can't affirm or prove in any way or offer decent evidence for, and start actually pointing out that their opponent's claims, without necessarily making any positive assertions of their own, are using flat Earth measurements. The more we can turn every argument that comes our way into that needs a flat Earth, that needs a flat Earth, that needs a flat Earth, here's how it's measured flat, here's how it's measured flat, here's how it's measured flat in your example of a globe. If people start doing that, no one will want to do the claiming of measurement part ever for a globe. They'll just take it to where it really belongs. Pure fantasy. Which is where it is. That's where it exists. And anything that's claimed to take it to a reality in measurement terms, it's going to need a flat Earth for it. There's no getting around it. We saw it with Planet Peterson and Bob the Science Guy. So Bob's being asked about measurements of the transit of Venus. And when it comes to the actual measurements, they didn't want to, or Bob didn't want to actually say it, angle measurements off a flat Earth. He didn't want to say it. We just skirted around it. And John caught it, and it's like, oh man, it's like they're gun shy when it comes to actually talking about the measurements they make, because they're going to be off a flat plane.
It's a very good. It's not a joke, but it kind of is a really cool story where the we could do it in a lab. We could get all these compounds, and we could just do this and do that. And then God says, "Oh yeah, get your own dirt."
Fortunately, the punchline
You got to
came through
assume
clearly.
that that you have substance.
We only got about 20% of that, but we got get your own dirt.
Yeah, and he tries to show that he can create life without God, but he has to get dirt and substance and material and the laws of physics and all these things. And then God basically says, "Okay, get your own dirt."
Yeah, get your own flat Earth.
Right? The point of that whole thing is that, yeah, exactly. These people are arguing past the antecedent. You know what I mean?
What I mean is, my audience is going to be so impressed that given we only had 10% audibility in that garbled nonsense that just came through your mic, the fact that I knew what you were talking about, that's class. That's talent. And I made a further follow-up point to what you said, literally with 10% audibility. Amazing.
I eventually lowered the bit rate.
Like we were staying in here today, right? We're in Home from Home, Flat Earth debate, science versus scientism. What's it called again? Science versus pseudoscience. Is that the name of the
It's
server?
FED now. It's called FED now.
Oh, it's just called FED now.
Or
Maybe that's
well, the
why
full name.
someone accused me of my server getting shut down in Earth Awakenings yesterday. I'm like, no. Like, you got banned. I'm like, no, I did not get banned. My server did not get shut down.
Yeah, yeah. We just changed it to this because it's got more FE in it. You know what I mean? It's when people look for the subject, they can find it easily. And anyways, this is called FED now, or the full name. So we got the abbreviated and the full name of FED. And if you want to go somewhere, you can go anywhere, anytime. So if you want to go somewhere now, you can. But the only ones I know of would be like Earth Awakenings. AI is the one that knows 24/7. So if you want to go to 24/7, talk to AI Overlord.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't even know if there's anybody there at the moment. Is there anybody there at AI? It doesn't matter because it still would pile up eventually if you get in there. Just like yesterday, Earth Awakenings, when you got there, was pretty empty, but then it piled up.
I think with 24/7, it's one of those that, because it's sort of more of a bit more casual about people just turning up. If we were to just turn up in 24/7, have we been there yet?
Yeah, you guys have when you and Sleeping Warrior were going at it. That was the day you guys were at 24/7.
I think he has actually fallen out with me. He hasn't contacted me since.
Well, no comment. I didn't follow that scene. I just heard people talking about it, mention some things about it, but I didn't follow that whole discussion you guys had. So, I don't
Anthony
know.
wasn't very happy
But
about
you
it.
know,
The interaction, that is. Go ahead.
it just reinvigorates the point of the hypersaturation in our culture to be averse to calling the Earth flat, right? When you could just say, you know, hey, bro, the Earth's flat, everybody loses their minds, right?
Yeah, we've been trained to, though. I think the cyclical nature of the Feast of Nonsense is why there's a resurgence every now and again of Flat Earth, so that we can be kept up in the public eye as a group worthy of ridicule. So when people hear the term, it triggers them in such a way that they, like you say, lose their mind immediately.
I will be fair. I will be fair to people who don't want to employ that term, that have nuanced it with, you know, I try to talk with people about my concepts without using that triggering word, right, until I get them to agree with me a little bit on certain terms and stuff and let them draw their own conclusions. But then you got other camps who are like hostile and essentially missionaries against the term flat Earth, right, by saying it's not perfectly flat for their various reasons, by defining flat as a particular thing, right, that is an ideal. And then they say, well, you can't measure an object to be flat in an idealistic sense. And that is true, but like nobody cares. Because let me tell you why I know this is the case. How many people think, you know, can confuse Nathan for a globe earther? Nobody, right?
No.
Unless they're accusing him of being a liar in itself and he's just deceiving everyone. But I've gotten messages, and we've heard people say, like, when the not flat earthers, and you know, like, Bev is obviously one of them. Globers can't understand whether Bev sometimes is a glober. They think he's a glober. They're completely confused about his position. They're like, wait a minute, is this guy a glober? It's like there's no ambiguity in just saying the Earth flat. Everybody knows what you mean.
Yeah, I know. But Bev's special. Or at least he wants to be. And not flat earther is looking for something unique in an already niche subject matter. So trying to carve out something unique, fair enough, whatever. Arguing against us about that, they just end up looking really stupid every single time, and it kind of does bewilder me as to why they would endure that. And the people who have endured it here have come back at a later date and gone, oh yeah, we've detached ourselves from that garbage now. You're like, really? Not surprised, because you repeated it and were very embarrassed by what you repeated, obviously having not given it much consideration. So in many ways, it's become, being a Bevite or a not flat earther, which is different to a glober and different to an anti-flat earther and different to a flat earther, then you're going to start repeating garbage that's going to make you look stupid really quickly.
I thought you were going to touch on that since this is already a niche subject, to like split it even more with like different namings of it would make it even more niche and more harder to find.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah. So whose interests does it serve beyond Bev maybe carving out a slight bit of unique essence with being pedantic about a particular definition? What does it achieve? Yeah, a bit of dilution, correct?
Yeah.
Doesn't faze me in the
And
slightest. We're moving forward on a very different foot in 2024, aren't we?
morning.
Hey, good morning.
There's coffee now. I never heard an intro with coffee.
Coffee link. I say Ko-Fi, so it's co
Oh,
hyphen fi. But then Paul, who was the guy who originally recommended it, because if you wanted to contribute to the show via a credit card or a debit card, you can't do that on PayPal. And obviously, if you're going to do a super chat, you've got to set yourself up on YouTube, which obviously other people might not want to do. So he said, well, why don't you have a link that facilitates people to just use a card? I'm like, oh, okay, what will that be? And he said, this. Put it under my nose, and I'm like, that's easy to set up, which I did. And then started charting it out once I got a link under the info box, which was to say, Ko-Fi link in the info box, right? In the intro. But it's not, it's coffee. And he explained that there's a different alternative site called Buy Me a Coffee, which is fairly popular, and this is just an alternative to that. Now, because he just put it under my nose and I was like, this is super easy to set up, I did. But it's not Ko-Fi, although that's how it's spelled, it's coffee. So there's a coffee link in the info box below the video. There you go. Now you know.
oh, it's not the click on the link and get a free coffee kind of deal then. Okay.
Click on the link and give me a coffee. That's the idea.
Yeah.
Buy me a coffee with the coffee link. But it probably won't go on coffee. It'll probably go on my mortgage. I'll be honest. Anyway, any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge, formerly known as the curve of the Earth?
No, that's been done with a few years back.
Any evidence of the distance to the sun?
No. How?
Get to the previous one.
All right.
Any evidence of Earth curve?
Okay, so that. Well, no, geometric sphere edge.
Yeah, any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge, formerly known as Earth curve?
Okay, so hyperpedantic spheres can't exist in three-dimensional free space. Therefore, the argument is irrelevant because the Earth can't possibly be a sphere. All right, I rest my case.
I don't understand. You have to slow down. Spheres don't exist in three-dimensional free space. What?
Yep.
Yeah, they do, don't they?
They only exist in idealized mathematics. and conceptual, because the concept of a sphere, right, is that every point of a surface is equidistant from the radial center, right? An object like that doesn't exist in physical reality because the mechanics of physical reality means that you're not going to have a radius because the structure of matter, right, is latticed even at a microscopic level. So you're not going to have a line that has an equal radius, 360 degrees around, that point to a radial center. It's not going to happen.
Gotcha.
Right? So I can dismiss the Earth being a sphere just by being hyper-pedantic about idealized geometry. Now, I think you all know where I'm going with that.
I do. I like it a lot. So what you're saying is, if I was to, in a pedantic manner, suggest that I could debunk the idea of Earth being the geometric description of spherical, that would be to say Earth is a spherical object floating in a sky vacuum. And I can debunk that by saying that there are mountains and valleys, and therefore to comport with the notion of being a sphere, having an equidistant radial value to the centre point, is absurd. No such beast exists in physical reality. Everything has imperfections. There is no sphere that could ever be described. Such a perfect entity doesn't exist. Ergo, Earth is not a sphere. Now, it reminds me of a little Neil deGrasse Tyson skit, let's call it, where he is asked a pretty much similar question about Earth's sphericity. And he answers that Earth is more like a pear shape, a little bit chubbier along the bottom. Now, that is taken out of context by many a flat earther back in 2016 to say that Earth is pear-shaped, and then you get the meme of a pear-shaped Earth. But he goes on to explain that there's a very limited difference between Earth as a perfect sphere and what he's describing by the slightly chubbier bottom, a tell for the stretching out they do when measuring planes with Polaris and then extending those lines out and wrapping them around a sphere. It becomes bigger and distorted. But he's just saying Earth's a bit chubbier along the bottom. Now, he makes an analogy, which is to say that if you had the Earth exactly as they claim it is scaled in a spherical shape, it would be akin to you holding something like a bowling ball. And as you run your hands over the smooth surfaces, ignoring the holes for your thumbs and fingers, you would find that it was basically perfectly smooth. But yet, when you got down to a microscopic level, by comparison to the valleys and mountains of Earth, when described as a sphere, they would be cavernous by comparison at scale, but yet feel perfectly smooth to your touch when you're running your hands over a bowling ball. A lot like Earth if it was the size of that bowling ball. The mountains and valleys would be shrunk down to a microscopic level where you wouldn't even detect them if you were running your hands over it. You'd run your hand over Everest and wouldn't even realise it was there. It would be so insignificant by scale. But basically, it's a perfect sphere. That was what Neil deGrasse Tyson explained when describing this pedantic notion that simply because it doesn't comport with the perfect geometry of having a perfect radial value from every point at the outside edge of a perfect geometric shape we call a sphere isn't possible because of hills, mountains and valleys, therefore it's not a sphere, is about as stupid as saying when you get a reference for horizontal and compare how high or low mountains and valleys are with respect to that perfect horizontal plane, Earth's not flat because you've got descriptions of how high or low things are with respect to an average of sea level, for example. So it's the same stupid comparison of saying I can debunk a sphere by saying hills and mountains are on it, therefore it's not perfectly spherical in that geometric description. It's as stupid as saying Earth's not flat because I can say how high mountains and valleys are with respect to how flat it is. Quick shout out to Sasha, I think it's Unitox Femi that's just hit the super chat. Where is it on mine so I can actually read it? When will we go to have coffee? After show? And then a little angel. If you actually want to get in touch with me and go for coffee, Sasha, anytime, you live about 10 miles from me. So I'm pretty sure we could go out for a coffee sometime. Just not at the moment because I am absolutely broke. So I haven't got in touch with my computer guy to go out for curries either or anything like that. It's just tighten the belt straps and not do anything. Make more videos. Try and get the mortgage covered. Anyway, thank you. Really appreciate the super chat. So thank you very much for the support. Was there anything else you wanted to add? I hope, because you've got a reasonably good line at the moment, actually, AI, if you did want to expand on it yourself, but I did it for you just in case your line broke up in the middle of that excellent comparison and juxtaposition. No, we're not going to get anything else out of AI. Okay, yeah, that was a bloody good point, though. We were discussing in the pre-show how absurd it is to reference Earth as flat to describe the heights and depths of mountains and valleys, and then say because of said mountains and valleys with respect to the flat surface, it's not flat. Yeah, good point, AI. Any, what haven't we covered for a while? Any evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth?
I think this was the worst one because they don't even bring this one up usually, right?
Yeah, it's thanks to Anthony Riley with a guy called Paul Voigt in a very, very early flat Earth debate. And the conversation got steered away. It developed 2 points, both get credited to Anthony Riley. The first, that when they have an awkward point, they'll try and obfuscate the point to an hour further down the road, so that even if they do eventually make the point that is devastating to their argument, it isn't necessarily connected to the original debate or question in a concise way. So they just push the can further down the road to make their disclaimer that's devastating. Further to that, he asked specifically Paul Voigt about evidence of a self-perpetuating molten iron core at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth. Now, we didn't have the at the centre of a presupposed spherical Earth edition at that particular stage of flat Earth debate, but Anthony Riley put it to him, and Paul Voigt buggered off to never return after saying, oh yeah, I've absolutely got evidence of that. So Anthony suggested that we should have a track record kept of such events, like Paul Voigt as the first example, literally was the first example of a housekeeping question, where the claim used to be quite prominent. Well, we've got a molten iron core. How'd you back it? With evidence? What evidence? I'll be right back, said Paul Voigt to Anthony Riley, and we never saw him again. And he was quite a fairly, regular participant in the debate. He was on almost every day until that happened. So we mark those sorts of occasions with housekeeping questions. In the most recent guys, it's any evidence that you can acquire an elevation angle measurement from a curved baseline. As a result, directly as a result of measuring elevation angles to navigate the world with. And that navigation of the world requires that you measure Earth flat. So to ask a ball-believing fundamentalist zealot, that would be, by example, I suppose, Rumpus going around, sextants only work on a globe. No, they absolutely don't work on a globe. And here's how. They're measuring angles, not curved surfaces. So they get marked with housekeeping questions for that reason.
That reminds me, so couldn't you say in effect that the housekeeping questions keeps the Globers away?
You could do.
Right. So then it wouldn't be advantage to the show if they're kept away.
What do you mean,
So
advantage
then-
to the show? You think
Well,
it's
if
an
it keeps-
advantage to have fundamentalist zealots chanting their religious beliefs as daily?
Well, people do like it when you talk to Globers. I mean, that's what the audience likes. Right?
Yeah.
So the audience likes that, and that's what they originally tuned in for, right? Like, then they expect that to
Well,
keep it
there's where
going.
the discrepancy comes straight away. No. Originally, yeah, when I started Flat Earth Debate, the audience is still even part of the intro and almost redundant now, was participating because they were intrigued about the subject and may want to challenge something that's being discussed on the show. The show doesn't reach anybody like that anymore. It's not put under anybody's nose like that anymore. Hence me e-begging, if you want to call it that, for people to share the show, because the more fresh audience members get put in front of the show and know that they can just click a link underneath and come in and say, I don't agree with you. We've got eclipses. All right, well, let's break that down. Let's see how that proves Earth's a sphere then. But you're saying I should now proactively go out and seek the attention of the people I've turned my back on. Now,
No, it's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, remember that one time we were trying to get some of them to come in and talk on the show, and we were talking about Back to the Future, and someone bit and came in because it was nice and relaxing conversation, and you're like, oh, maybe we should talk about another movie just to get them to come in and talk. Right? It's kind of like that. It's like there's things that can get them in to come more, and then there's things that can like keep them out more. Now you don't have to like go for the things that bring them in, but you can just eliminate the things that keep them out, so to say. Right? You don't have to proactively go after them, but you can just keep the things that keep them out and tone it down a little bit so they can feel more welcome to jump in.
I see what's going on here. Anthony's only been
Wait.
gone missing in action for about a week, and now you're trying to eradicate his legacy. It's disgusting.
Actually, I've been on this for a while, even before Anthony left. I don't know. Because I followed the show for a long time. I followed since like episode 200 and something, and I noticed ever since the housekeeping came in, I to be I guess honest with you, I never really liked how that changed the show, how the housekeeping changed the show, and how it ended up just pushing everybody else out. Because I like some of those guys, even if they didn't contribute to the conversation. Like, what was that guy's name? That what was his name? Al or something? And he had a picture of an old man. He was just good for sense of humor. He was just a character, really. And sometimes we just tuned into the show just because we got familiar with the characters, like we got familiar with the characters of a Seinfeld or Simpsons.
Well, that Al guy
So,
managed to get me over a barrel, right, with a gotcha. He's the guy who got me to, or asked me about converting meters into kilometers, or kilometers into meters. I forget which way round. But he got me over a barrel, and you would hope that people of the audience would want to do the same. Now, that's in a gotcha with a flat Earth or a globe Earth argument. It's just a personal gotcha. You're a Dumbo. Fine, yeah, point. But it doesn't win a point for the globe. So the housekeeping questions show where the progression of the show has taken apart the globe claim to the point where you're saying these questions now represent what stops globers coming in to claim Earth's a globe. Well, why? Because they can't win. Yeah, that's correct. Another quick shout out to Sasha Unitox Family, who says, I will pay everything, no worries. Well, if you're going to take me out for coffee and pay, then I feel terrible saying no. Yeah, we'll have to arrange it, Sasha. We'll go out for coffee. Definitely. Leamington's more
yeah,
beautiful than Coventry, though. So if you want to come to me, you can come out in my home turf, but you'll be paying. How rude am I? Push my luck.
right, but you got it. It shows them that they can't win. It's too blunt. It's too on the nose. It makes it too obvious that they can't win. They need to have it a little bit like they can win to come in.
Nah, I don't know if I agree with that at all.
All right. Well, how about this? How about this other angle? Right. The housekeeping questions is too strong of a format. It puts the show too much in the box, and it just kind of removes the free-flowing conversations that you had before.
But they weren't. They were fundamentalist religious zealots chanting their globe belief at me, trying to ask me why I didn't have an answer for an aspect of their religion that had been taken apart. Well, give me a new explanation for this. I got tired of it. It was tiring.
But even among FE people, if the housekeeping questions wouldn't be there would just be other things to talk about. Instead of always housekeeping, every day housekeeping. What are we going to do today? We're going to talk about housekeeping again.
Absolutely.
Righteous, you're onto something.
No, I don't think so. Well, let me fight my corner for why I think you're wrong. When I hear somebody else out on the circuit fighting with these questions, because the essence of the question is based on an argument that's been thrashed out to the point where it can be concisely summarised by that housekeeping question. So when I hear someone on the circuit arguing about why you can't have gas pressure without a container, what did I see the other day that had come from a housekeeping question? I photographed it. I'm going to give you a bloody good example of why these are worth going over every single day without exception. And it's a meme that I saw on Facebook. So I very rarely go on Facebook or Twitter. In fact, I don't. I only see them when I click on my Uncut and After show for the second channel and share that show, because it gets such terrible viewing figures. So I share that myself, along with encouraging everybody else to do the same. But when it's got like 30 people you're watching, you're like, this is pants, it should have 100. Nevertheless, that my moans about the viewing consistency of the second channel is irrelevant. The point is, when I shared the show last, I saw a meme. And the meme I saw was about Coriolis effect. And what the meme had, if I can find it while I'm talking, is a picture of a Foucault pendulum knocking over dominoes. And underneath it had an aeroplane. And it said, if Earth turns underneath the pendulum, then Earth turns underneath aeroplanes. About as concise as one frame meme. Who's got that mic? Oh, it's AI. I can't find it. I thought I screenshot it. God damn. timing. When you're live, you can never find anything that you want. Go ahead, AI. What were you going to add something to that? You were going to say it wasn't worth having the housekeeping questions, I felt.
No, I wasn't saying that. I just say he's on to a point, which is all the housekeeping questions usually are derivatives from arguing from their position backwards, right?
Yes.
Like a good housekeeping question might be any evidence that the Earth isn't obviously utilized, lived upon, and operated within as a flat stationary plane or something along those lines, right?
I'm more than happy to ask that
or even
question.
simpler.
Man, if the housekeeping editions become thick and fast that are all geared towards any evidence why we can't just measure it flat like we do, or something along those lines, then I'd be elated. I mean, I would get behind those 100%.
And
Yeah. For example, I'll give you an example. Okay, so an object, right, can exist within a gaseous environment, right? And that object can have an infinite permutation of surface qualities and shape, right? So properly and logistically, arguing about gas pressure doesn't actually determine the nature of the Earth we're standing on in itself. Now it does determine things about the larger environment, right? That the Earth might be, you might call it within, like the Earth is within this environment, let's say, or the Earth is adjacent to this environment. But those adjacents don't necessarily prove in themselves the nature of the Earth itself. You see what I mean?
No, say it all again.
Okay, so you can have an object that's stationary or rotating within a gaseous environment. You can have an object that's a sphere or a ball or a cuboid or a pyramid inside a gaseous environment, right? Could be any permutation of shape and surface quality, right?
Yeah.
So the gaseous environment isn't contingent upon the object being any particular shape or surface quality. So to say because there's gas pressure, the Earth is a ball, or because there's gas pressure, the Earth is flat, is actually not logically contingent. It doesn't prove it.
I agree. Yeah, the gas pressure without a container argument is a debunking of the notion that a positive claim of a sky vacuum is in any way validatable. It isn't. It violates natural law, but it is a positive assertion from our opponent's side that their reified model by way of flat Earth measurements exists within a sky vacuum.
Right,
Sure, but I would just point out to Righteous's point. It's like part of what they like. A lot of Globers just think, and we see it all the time. They just think claiming the word gravity as an appeal to down like proves their ball because they already have a preconceived notion that these things are intrinsic to each other. That like the necessary antecedent for down is a giant floating ball. You see, and it's like it does kind of give them this edge, is where it's like, well, if you're already gonna throw out gravity, it's like why do I have to prove gravity? It's already down. But if you put it in the other foot, at least sometimes it's like, okay, any evidence that the Earth isn't obviously flat. Oh yeah, this imagination that I have between the contingent nature of down and giant floating space testicles, right? And then they start joining in the conversation. Maybe that's where he's going. Maybe he's saying
it's
people are too defeated to even try.
wait a
Which
second.
maybe what you're going for.
Maybe instead of speculating what I'm saying, you guys could just go, "Hey, Righteous, what are you saying?"
That's not how this
Righteous.
works, right?
What are you saying?
See, this is season 9 of this show, bro. If you don't know how this show works by now,
Well, let me simplify it a little bit more, okay? Because I was thinking about it a bit more while AI was throwing around all these complex words. I mean, like you use some big words sometimes. That's what I mean. It's not a bad thing that you do, but it's like you see when the housekeeping questions get asked, I don't want to like. Why do I have to say no? Why do I have to come to say no? Like that's because that would be the answer for everything. Would be no. We wouldn't even have to talk about it. And then there's the other thing: if somebody does answer and somebody does take the bait to answer the housekeeping questions, it feels like they're just put on a spot to perform. Okay, hey guys, it's time to perform again. Here's the housekeeping questions. Do your dance. And it's like, oh, another dance about geometric horizon, or another dance about gravity, another dance about so. And it just feels like it's phoned in a little bit or something. It doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel, I don't know, feel staged.
It is.
Yeah, but isn't it better to have a natural conversation and come
Aha,
up with some interesting
I
stuff that way?
have,
Yeah, I get,
I have an
what you
apropos
mean.
comment. So a large contention that I've had with the housekeeping questions over the time, and I'm not saying this isn't useful, is that the majority of people who are answering them are the panel acting in the role of the glober.
Correct.
Right. So the glober is already present in the conversation. So if you want to have actual people show up to offer it, right? Like what Righteous is saying, it's like the conversation's closed. It's like
Don't
we
answer.
literally are. Go ahead.
I said, don't answer. He's saying, I hate playing this ball position. It's so contrived. It feels staged. It is. Don't answer. That's the solution, isn't it? I say to an audience, let's just try this. I hate dead air, but for this particular example, we'll allow it. It's tolerable. Any evidence of Earth curve? Any evidence of axial rotation?
I love it.
If there's a stony silence after the housekeeping question, it's unanswered, isn't it? Righteous. And how would that
but
make
who's
you
not
feel if you were a participant in the audience, hearing the question, is there any evidence that there's Earth curve? And nobody answers. There's no concise rendition of why there's no Earth curve. It's just left unanswered. Now, if you're a anti-flat earther and you hear that, it would enrage you. Because it's just left unanswered, isn't it? They want to go, yeah, of course there is. The horizon's Earth curve, isn't it? But they can't. It's just a stony, unanswered silence to a question that's been answered plenty of times, right? Right, just to the point where you're sick of it. So don't answer it. That's my answer to this. As for getting rid of
All right,
housekeeping questions, no way.
And-
Would you change phonics? Because as a YouTuber covering phonics, man, this gets boring. Does it change how it works? No.
I don't know. I was just thinking about the old shows. Maybe I'm waxing nostalgia or something like that. But in the old
Oh,
shows,
bless
you would
you.
cut the you would cut
You
the
missed the
intro.
blood. Yeah, you missed the blood.
No, not necessarily that. It just there were just certain things like when you cut out from the intro in the old show, you'd be like, "Oh, let's go listen to the docile tones." It's not pronounced docile, but you said, "Let's listen to the docile tones of the whatever's going on there," right? And then you turn on the volume on an ongoing conversation. The show is already to like a strong start. But if you come in with the housekeeping, you put a stop to that ongoing conversation, everybody being fired up,
We'll see if Mr. Meekin's got
right?
anything to comment on this because he's joined. It may be
Oh,
it's
he joined
just
too late.
coincidence he's just joined, but you know what I mean. Hello, Adam.
Afternoon,
Yeah.
guys. I heard just a little bit. I wouldn't
We're
get
talking
rid of the
about whether we should do the
questions.
housekeeping or we should do away with them.
No, it sounds to me like you've got like pining for ballers, and you've identified the reason is the questions is they can't answer them, which is why the ballers don't come anymore. Good. Let them
That's-
demonstrate they
that's
can't
not-
answer the questions.
All right, fine. Even if they don't come in anymore, it's still like affecting us who are here, the housekeeping questions, don't they?
What I said, you've got baller pining. You want ballers in, don't you? Oh,
Not necessarily.
ballers! Well, they've gone.
Not.
They've lost.
I know. Actually, myself personally, I don't. I prefer talking to FE guys, but people in the audience do prefer that there's some FE
Well,
callers.
it's a closed circuit loop, right? It's like imagine a news station that the only news that they do is a single thing every day. It's like, well, I know exactly what to expect, so why should I watch it the next day? I could have just watched an old
Because-
episode and I get the exact same thing.
Because 99% of the people don't watch it. So if they do stumble on it, then news needs to be there. We don't need to change the truth. The truth's there. Questions are there. They're not answered. Frustrating and boring as it might be
Yeah.
to those that do it every day,
There's a
What's the def-
distinction. There's an
Yeah, so
internal
let's.
distinction between us seeing something go stale because internally you're like, well, it's repetitive. If you're an ongoing viewer of flat Earth debate, you'd hate the housekeeping questions and probably fast forward through them every single time you hear them because they're familiar and you don't necessarily want to hear the same thing being discussed every single time with the same answer, with the only change being that I vary the couple of housekeeping questions I ask each day, and maybe once a week or once a fortnight go through all of them in one show. But I can understand how that would seem stale. But what Adam's saying is, if that day you happen to be an avid news watcher and you like to keep up with current affairs, and then you stop into a train station and it has BBC Two on, where you're typically an ITV fan, and they reel off the exact same regurgitated news from the same desks that every single news outlet has scoured their crappy news headlines from to regurgitate in the almost exact same fashion as every other news broadcasting network ever. And you sit in front of it and take in the information and then go, hang on, if I flip the channel, I get the exact same news headlines about the exact same stories. You're like, yeah, you will. They're all covering the same thing because it's the same thing being covered. Now, I'm not questioning the validity or truth of news media outlets. I'm just saying that to say, well, I've got the same information again. Yeah, well, it hasn't changed. Yeah, Earth's still measured flat. There is still no Earth curve. Axial rotation has got absolutely no evidence for it. And the fact that the Western world, so I'm now going to expand. So that's our internal. Yeah, I can understand why you'd see it as getting stale. On a wider scale, yeah, the Western world at large believes they're on a spinning sphere flying through a vacuum. So to keep the information focused for every single individual that makes his way to Flat Earth Debate, this show, they need two things as far as I'm concerned. Number one, they need the housekeeping questions. And if it means that it's stale for the people who've heard them before, you've heard them before. If you don't recognise the importance of them, then go and make a show that doesn't do that to compete with me and do it better, because then I'll applaud you, like Flatsoid. If Flatsoid's doing it, he doesn't have housekeeping. If Flatsoid becomes more successful than me, I'll applaud him for it. Wonderful, because it's getting the information out in a different, more varied way. But I feel it's critical that the information, which has remained the same and will never change, gets reiterated daily. That's my opinion.
Well, I noticed that Flatsoid's numbers are catching up to yours. That
Good.
actually already says something.
Good.
That says something like, hey, maybe we got to look at the show a little bit closer.
Well, fair points, but I don't think Righteous is critiquing that those questions need to be fleshed out throughout the period of the show, but having them fleshed out in an interconversational way. But that's only if you want that type of engagement. If somebody doesn't want that type of engagement in a show, right? They can't, like you said, like this show could be a talk, like on the news channels, right? Throughout the day, they have opinion shows. They have the brute, this is the facts of what's going on shows. And then, sometimes they have talk shows. A lot of them talk about the exact same information. They just have a different manner in which they do it that engages different people. And that's, I guess that's what Righteous might be saying. But it doesn't it doesn't matter what Righteous is actually saying. It only matters what we think he's saying.
Yeah.
The housekeeping questions are there to open up the doors, yeah, to fill that, to set a little agenda to give you an idea. But this is an open forum, and there's been plenty of people turn up and deliver all sorts of stuff. Yeah, I don't think it's that prescriptive here that you can't just turn up and claim something else or discuss something. You're not only welcome if you're going to discuss a housekeeping question. You're welcome to bring anything to the table.
Righteous had a particular point.
Nearly done. What we ask is
Righteous had a particular point that you missed because you came late. Is that he noticed? This is just what Righteous said. He noticed a marked decrease in the attendance once there was just the brief housekeeping questions. That's if he can speak for himself, but that's what I heard.
Not attendance, interest.
Okay.
Like the show got, I'll be blunt, the show got more boring. And I'm a fan. I was a huge fan of the Nathan show. I'm not so much of a fan now. Okay. and I'm just being straight up with you guys. I do want the show to do good, right? And you guys were talking earlier about how to make the show better. So here it is. We're discussing how to make the show better.
In that respect, I see a requirement for a housekeeping question that's 2024 orientated. That is to say, it alludes to the notion that you require a flat plane for all claims. That needs to be diluted down into a housekeeping question and put into circulation. But for me, the housekeeping question's not only like a newsreel, keep the headline, because as much as you want to see it as getting stale, that's the point I was trying to drive at. It is still the headline when you get here. What's the headline? If you're a Western world normie, Earth is a sphere, right? So when you get to flat Earth debate, what's it all about? You need to know the main talking points and how they're overcome immediately, as far as I'm concerned. Now, if you can think of a way that's less repetitive to get that out beyond what I've already attempted to do with housekeeping, which is not give every single question every single day, but try and pass them out throughout the week and make sure that by Friday we have actually covered each and every question. But I find that they do develop each time we ask them, right? We only normally get through 2, or in previous shows, we normally wouldn't get through all 5 because one of the questions would spark enough interest in one of the panel or one of the Discord server participants to go, I had a discussion about axial rotation with a guy that was claiming that Earth's a non-inertial reference frame and the sky's a non-inertial reference frame. Can we discuss that? Sure. Do you know what I mean? So, although it can appear that for you, because you were on the spot for the first time ever to answer these questions today, Righteous, and you're like, I ain't answering them and saying no.
Okay, I got a really pointed critique, Righteous. Check this out. The people who are here routinely, whether they have been Globers who stayed for years, whether they've been Flat Earthers who stayed for years, we are hypersaturated with the topic. We are bored with the topic. But new people who are just coming in don't have all of that history, and they don't have all of that fatigue of talking about the same topic. And so with intermittent housekeeping questions, like Nathan said, in conjunction with new audiences, like he's doing recently, right? Look at the engagement that he got of just going to the different platforms, right? Speaking to different people who don't have the history, right? So it's a new conversation to them in a way. And those two things coupled together could be very successful.
So he's basically saying,
without
he's basically saying you're the problem, Righteous.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
You know what? You guys are both onto something. Okay, I'll tell you this. You see, I'm looking at it from the long-term audience. I'm a long-term audience member of the Nathan Show. You guys are all of a sudden excluding us and going only for the new guys.
No, we're not.
Right? To us.
What do you mean?
Well, like in the sense of like you're only catering to them, and to us, I've heard these things over and over and over, and it's monotonous, as AI said. Why are you putting us through this torture kind of thing, right?
No, I do sympathise because there's 2 aspects to look at. One is the internal aspect of the participants in the show and keeping them interested. You are one of them. And the other is keeping it consistent for somebody who comes as a viewer, so that if they were to share the show, as the language gets better and there's less swearing and it becomes more shareable, not only does it become more shareable from that aspect, there's also a consistency to the information that's always delivered to an audience member, be them old or new. Together with, there's always going to be enough variety in the rest of the show beyond the housekeeping questions. But I don't really want to just take the easy way out and go, look at all the other things we do on the show. That would be the easy way out because we're focusing on housekeeping specifically. So I'm not going to do that. But the housekeeping, I do feel that it's worthy. If it needs spit and polish or readapting in some manner, I'm all for it. And in my mind, the only thing that it really needs, is the 2024. You're going to need a flat Earth for that, incorporating into those questions in the circulation of them. And there's only a couple of them each day, as much as it's tedious for the internal participants.
Okay, let me add quickly. Okay, shouldn't the core audience be us FE people?
No.
And if the core audience is us
going to
FE
upset
people,
you, isn't it? No.
It isn't. Oh my goodness.
Probably. No, unfortunately not. If you think you're the person I'm trying to capture as an audience member, then you're wrong. Do you want to know who? This is like a Lionel Hutz line. Do you know who the right audience member is?
Go on.
Everyone. Lionel Hutz goes trying to train Marge on selling houses. And at the end of his little lesson about what positive spin is, I'll give you one example just so I can move the example on quickly. He shows her a house that's small. She says it's small. She says, no, it's quaint. He shows her a house that's on fire. And she says, well, that house is on fire. Come on. He says, no, motivated seller. Positive spin, right? And he explains to her that the right house is the one that's for sale and the right person to buy it is anyone. Well, the right argument is the one that works. And the person I'm trying to sell it to is anybody that can possibly
I'll challenge
listen.
I'll challenge that. You're wrong. Because the housekeeping questions keeps the Globers away and it keeps the flat earthers bored.
Yep, bro. Let me answer that for you, Righteous. I think I got where Righteous's vibe is coming from. I think, when you say motivated seller, when you say it's quaint, maybe Righteous might be saying all he sees is a for sale sign with a sold sticker on it, not for sale anymore. So there are no customers coming because there's no product being sold because the product's already been said discontinued, right? So we put up a big sign, Globe Earth Paradigm discontinued. There's no reason to show up anymore.
Okay, so your argument is because I've heard this before too. There's no debate, says commenter below Flat Earth debate. Earth is measured flat. The discussion is concluded. There's nothing more to discuss. My reply, absolutely correct. See you tomorrow when I'll tell you that Earth's flat. Yeah, because that's what we'll do tomorrow. Because what happens if we pack up shop and say, man, it got boring telling everyone that Earth's flat. And then next man standing next to you goes, you what? Earth's flat? Don't be a numpty. We've got Earth over the horizon. And you go, oh, if only this numpty had heard one of the flat earther talking about housekeeping on a prolonged basis. So he understood that that's been dealt with quite a significant amount of times. Because as soon as we stop asking those questions, we get two things. We get you satisfied because your boredom's no longer... I'm going to call it like it is. If you're calling it boredom, fine. Your boredom's overcome because next man comes in and says, are you guys all stupid? Yeah? Don't you know we've seen boats going over the horizon for a long time? You dumbos. If you want that, we can get rid of all the housekeeping question and just talk about films as the opener. So when someone who's foreign comes to the show and goes, they're talking about Back to the Future. This is a flat earth show. These dumbos need educating. I'll tell them how boats go over the horizon. And then there'll be blood for a 10-minute period while someone shouts over me, trying to correct them because he thought I was a dumbo, because he didn't hear the housekeeping questions. But there we go. I mean, that is something we could do. We could reset the clock.
Well, let me add a little bit more to what I said earlier, right? It keeps the... Good morning, Chocolate. How I said earlier, it keeps the ballers away and it keeps the flat earthers bored, right? And you said, no, my core audience is everybody. And that's not necessarily true. You can see your core audience in the Discord, on the panel, and in the text chat of your YouTube channel. And they're all FE guys mostly. So you should appeal to those guys because they're with you.
Okay. Well, the chat's swinging its way by on the live stream show picture right now. And I'll respond to anybody that says that housekeeping question's terrible, we need to get rid of it, or have a massive overhaul of some description.
Can I ask, sorry, Nathan, is the conversation about whether the housekeeping questions are still relevant or not?
Yeah.
Is that what we're talking about?
Yes.
Wow, that's...
Yes,
that's funny.
Yes, but that's only...
It's funny because just the other day, I was kind of thinking in that direction, like with our new, I guess, approach to things, like are asking those questions even relevant? Even though there's obviously a history behind each one, it's like, do we even go with that anymore? So it's kind of funny that I walked in and we're talking about this now. Sorry, AI, go ahead, brother.
Chocolate, but we got to understand the real sociological discussion at play at this very moment. And what that is Righteous Forces board, and we have to fix it.
That's true.
You can't have righteous boy now.
No, let's not
Yeah.
demean him, right? He's already had props from Bev Try Thinking in the chat going, what would Nathan do if it wasn't for Righteous? He runs the server. I have my hat hung on daily. Well, he's absolutely correct, right? And I gave mad props to the people who are running the politics server when I went in for the AMA. But I also hope that Righteous appreciates how much work I know he puts in so that we've got a home here on what is now called Flat Earth Debate. So it's named the same as the show. So I can kind of give a bit of sympathy to the guy that claimed my server had been shut down. I don't have a server. It's entirely run by people that I don't have any connection with in that regard. I don't have any input in terms of how the servers run. It's all done by Righteous and all of the mods and all the people who are running the server. So, you know, my credit goes to all of them. And I wouldn't have a home from home. I wouldn't have somewhere to hang my hat if it wasn't for Righteous. And he does deserve a lot of credit. So when Righteous says he doesn't like something, it is important and it will get discussed. And that is why it's getting discussed. As much as we're trying to, like we've played down Brian when he says something really intelligent and say, oh, yeah, you thought about it 2 weeks ago. Yeah, that's a sort of, or at least I'll speak for myself, me showing my insecurity. Yeah? And in this instance, we're demeaning the authority that Righteous has most assuredly earned. So he gets to have his say, he gets to have his objections, and we will take them seriously and discuss them, as we are, for that very reason. Just want to make that absolutely clear while we start demeaning Righteous, because really, I say all that. We don't really care. I'm only joking,
Well, I
Righteous.
didn't look at it.
No,
I didn't look at it as a
props to
meeting. I
Righteous.
looked at it
Man,
as just
Righteous has been. Sorry, man. I was trying to give you some props because you've been holding it down for a minute, bro. Like Righteous is part of the fan out here, regardless of how you feel about him. And from what as far as I'm concerned, he's been doing a great job. So
Absolutely.
kudos to you, bro.
And I wasn't looking at you guys as demeaning me or anything like that. I was just talking. I'm comfortable talking with you guys, so that's all it is. It's just talking to people that I've known for a while.
Well, I want to get some proper audience participation. I think that tends to go down well if I actually go on camera and ask for it, like, to camera, because then people know I'm serious. I'm reading out some of the chat comments. So the live stream chat is running now. If you do want to make a comment on this, I would appreciate, based on what Righteous has just said, your input from the live stream chat. So the question on the table is, are the housekeeping questions effective? Let's just put it in that way so that I hopefully get some interaction that's worthy of response from the chat. So please leave your comments. I will read them out. I'll leave them up on stream as they're going by as you're making them. But if there is anything that's worthy of response, I will respond to it as the live stream chat is going along. Go ahead, whoever that was.
I don't know. It depends on what you mean by effective, I would say, because like Righteous's idea was engagement with flat earthers that are long-term, parts of the community, and then also engagement with new people, and also bringing in new Glovers to discuss. So I guess there's at least three ways you could take that. Like, are they effective at, are they effective at making a statement rhetorically? Yes, they are effective in doing that. They are also effective. What Righteous seems to say is they're effective at excluding people from even trying to answer them because they're taken as a foregone conclusion. Like, this is so rhetorically settled in itself, the question answers itself. So maybe, I don't know, I guess there's just still like this ambiguity in the kind of engagement that you want to get with the questions.
And we should also ask other people on the Discord channel, because there's quite a few of us there. What do you guys think of the housekeeping questions?
Anybody? They're in
Anybody?
VC. They only need to open their mic and open their mouths and they'll be heard, right? Steve Finneran says, housekeeping questions are ace. Try Thinking says, the housekeeping questions have never been used outside of your FED show.
Yeah, the housekeeping questions are very valuable.
We got George who wants to say something.
Yeah, the housekeeping questions are very valuable. The reason why we've been talking about them for so long, it just sharpened the argument. Look where we came. Yeah, we ended up in 2024 with the conclusion that for all of the housekeeping questions, you're going to require a flat plane for that. You cannot just brush past that.
Right, but Bev is categorically wrong. Permutations of the question, maybe not verbatim, are engaged in conversations across multiple servers, especially, I know for a fact, in 24/7, some other people, it's like the simple question you put to someone, like any evidence of measured Earth curvature, right? Or you might say, hey, you got any evidence that the curvature of the Earth was measured? Right, you can see how you could permutate this question almost 100 different ways, but it's essentially the same question. Glober comes in and says, oh, the Earth's obviously a globe. It's obviously a globe. And then you ask them, okay, any evidence that the Earth's curved? Sufficient to your globe? So it's not true that these questions are isolated to this platform. So I would just put this question out there. Any evidence that an object, right, that's clearly described as flat isn't going to be described as flat because there's microscopic undulations on the surface? How about that question?
I've just got to be a new bonnet for
And
Bev today. I'm just going to read out one more.
the
I'm just going to read out
point.
one more. DJD637 says, new people are waking up every day. They need a starting point. Thank you very much. Keep these comments coming. I will keep reading them out.
This would be the point for me with regards to why the housekeeping questions are there. Yeah, they're an aid to memoir, aren't they? But ultimately, they do represent 6 years of hard work, and behind each question is a perfectly refined argument against the ball or in support of flat Earth. So the question's there as a starting point, or to try and get the baller to bite on any of those topics. But with regards to housekeeping questions, you've had 6 years of flat Earth debate where after you ask the question, even if unprompted by a baller, one of us will pretend to give repetition of the argumentation you should be using, or shouldn't have to be using, but is there for you to use if you do choose to do so, and it is the best quality argument. That's why it's worth repeating.
Give you a couple more chat opinions. TB says, yes, they are effective. Awake the Iron says, the politics server AMA was epic. Thank you very much. But keep the comments coming about for housekeeping questions effectiveness. I will keep reading them out.
They're effective like that. I don't think that is Righteous's beef, is it? Righteous's beef is they're not effective at entertaining him and what he's pointing out, the Discord server. They're not finding...
I think he was more talking about the placement of the questions, how we're in a good conversation, we're all, in a deep, meaningful, back and forth between each other. And then I think he's thinking that the questions placed right there in the middle, when it could be a nice flow into the show. You know what I mean? Of course, it's at your discretion, Nathan, but I think that's what he was saying.
Yeah, so that's why you got told off earlier, Adam, because you joined mid-show, and I was trying to point out that we were all enjoying a jolly good laugh at Bev Try Thinking for his stupid assertions, and then the live stream starts. Obviously, there's a gap when I break off connection between Discord and G+, but when we reconnect, instead of the conversation continuing and us having a laugh at, using flat to show how flat it isn't, continuing, we've got a question about Earth curve geometry, and suddenly everyone's got to flip into this anti-baller devil's advocate position where they have to answer no and then sit there like a numpty for the next question to come. That's the objection from Righteous, and he's saying that's tedious. 6 years into housekeeping questions, yes, we had a few, but when you're on the panel day in, day out, and you're already well aware of these questions, it becomes a bit stale.
Yeah, that was pretty good. Anybody else from Discord or chocolate?
I think
Chocolate.
the only reason that they
Hold on,
become stale
Adam,
is
then
because...
chocolate. Go ahead, Adam.
Sorry, go ahead, Adam.
So the only thing I'd say to that, if that was me, and in the pre-show, let's carry this on, is what the Discord guys need to be saying. Nathan shouldn't have to be arbitrary to try and juggle that. You're all big enough and ugly enough to have a say, yeah. Particularly you, Righteous. If there is a good topic going on, I know we've done that in the past. Let's carry this on into the show. So a bit of ownership, I think, and instead of saying I don't like this, let's bring to the table what we do like, and if that's it, then just I think step it up and mention it. If I've got something I want to mention that's not housekeeping, I just bring it up, and I think you're all welcome enough to do that, aren't you? Nathan's going to only encourage you.
I'm going to give a couple more comments from the chat. So, a man like me says, maybe a new set of questions? Maybe. Brian Mabbott, actually, I think this got discussed already, but I agree with you. It says, effectively giving you dead air when nobody answers. Yes, I actually offered that up as a suggestion to Righteous as a solution, which is to say, rather than answering them, it'll infuriate anti-flat earthers if they hear dead air because nobody's answering. Any evidence of Earth curve? Any evidence of axial rotation? Dead air can be effective. Thank you, Brian. Keep the comments coming.
I do like that. I do want to answer to what he said. Is that yes, we as seasoned members can take advantage of these questions for our own purposes. For example, Nathan, you asked that one about is the Earth, measure. What was that first one you asked this morning? Curvature or something like that.
Any evidence of a physical geometric sphere edge, formerly known?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And you notice how I took control of that question to platform my ideas, right?
Yeah. Well, that's why they've been so carefully phrased. And I'm not knocking Righteous or saying he's wrong. And even, again, someone from the chat saying, well, maybe no housekeeping on Friday. Who is it that said that? See if I can find it. Mike, the mechanic, 123 says maybe no housekeeping Fridays and then see how it goes. Yeah, maybe a break from housekeeping questions is all you need,
I don't know. You need to rebrand. You need to rebrand the title though.
From housekeeping.
Well, you're not no housekeeping Fridays. It's got to be something more zingy. Like maybe,
right. No housekeeping Friday does not have a ring to it, Mike. Or
yeah. Maybe delusional paradigm amnesty Fridays. How about that?
Yeah, that's got a much better ring to it, but also, your own special AI complicated word way, as Righteous would put it. Amnesties. Most people will be like unfamiliar with that term in relation to not having housekeeping questions, let's be honest, but it is correct terminology. And I applaud you for that.
Chocolate was going to say something too.
Yes, I forgot about you, Chocolate. Totally my bad.
It's all good. I was just going to add that me, I feel, give me a second.
Well, I'll give you a second. Crockett says housekeeping is priceless. So there's lots of positivity and a moderate amount of negativity about it.
It all hinges on chocolate now. How he answers.
I'm sorry. So the only thing I was going to say was the only reason it seems like these questions have gone stale is because nobody's trying to answer them. None of the people that believe any of these questions are legit or not legit for the way we're asking them. They're not trying to answer them. If there was a Glober in here every day saying these questions, I got these all day. I got the answers for these. You don't have the answers. I got the answers. Right? If we had that every day, this would be lovely. But nobody's trying to answer any of these questions because they know already they can't. I mean, they've been trying for years and they don't try anymore. So I think that's really the only reason this has become stale is because Globers have kind of given up. Unless you're going to prove me wrong, Globers.
Oblate Severoid says an alternative to globe narrative / beliefs is critical to the efforts in converting Globers. And he says alternative Fridays. It sounds like I've had that a couple of times, right? So it sounds like one option is to dispense with housekeeping question on one day. So there is no barrier put up to a potential newbie. So there's a 1 in 5 chance that a live stream will have a fundy come along and not have us immediately wipe out any possibility of them having any angle whatsoever to come into the show to say you're all idiots, and then Righteous gets his blood.
So is that not what you've been doing, I think, on a Friday anyway? We're into politics.
I didn't say anything about blood. Like when you go to politics server and you talk with all these Globers or the Earth Awakenings, I usually take a break on those days. But I know it's good for your audience, right? I know your audience likes that.
Are you just denying that you like watching wrestling, metaphorically speaking? I don't like the blood, but I know the audience loves it. Metaphorical blood. Metaphorical blood. You've watched some of the members-only videos that I've trimmed out from the AMA. Yes, they're all perfectly cordial. There's plenty of blood, metaphorically speaking.
Well, it made you happy. It made the audience happy. It made your wife happy with the bills getting paid better. I mean, I look at the positive sides, right?
I just wanted to add a little bit to this panel here. It's Gilly here.
Feel free.
I'm just wondering, like, when I'm looking at a debate, we're looking at two worldviews colliding. And ultimately, the flat Earth versus the globe Earth paradigm is meeting each other in a UFC octagon or whatever. And what I wanted to try to see when I go into these venues and look at what is going on, I want to expand my thinking, learn something new. And what I feel, even though I'm fairly new to especially this panel and other shows like this, it's like Righteous is mentioning, it's talking points that are coming again and again and again. And it's basically my worldview is better than your worldview because. But I'm always wondering, why the lie? If the Globers have believed a lie since they were born, which is kind of the shift in people's thinking, what do we really know? Where is science currently today? And I was listening to you talking about Sabine Hossenfelder. And if you look at the YouTube comments under her videos, it's like that's the audience we have to kind of talk to. They are the believers in the theoretical physics and the pseudoscience. So I feel like for both for new viewers and for the old viewers, we could expand on maybe why has this lie survived so long? And if it's a lie, you see. The other talking points I feel is basically my worldview is better than your worldview. And it's like listening to an atheist and a Christian debate about their worldviews, you see.
Okay, so what are you suggesting in regards to housekeeping, if anything?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I wasn't expanding on that. I just wanted to add this little talking point into the discussion.
No, that's fair enough. No, I agree. The audience I'd love to appeal to, although they are included in the basically everybody audience that I'd like to appeal to in that regard, is the pseudoscience-loving Sabine Hossenfelder audience that are intrigued by science. And there's plenty of it to offer. Where's science taking us? Well, in a route that debunks Einstein currently, and it's offered us plenty of technology to be going on with that you can example that are genuinely coming from scientific validation, cause and effect reasoning based on experimentation that debunks Einstein, that debunks the globe. You know, there's a attempt to suppress a lot of this information by offering it up within the paradigm of heliocentrism. That would be to say, calling everything quantum gravity, quantum foam, quantum this, quantum that. You know, well, that's stealing valor from the current actual science that we could be offering to expand the interest of the viewer. And we've got our illustrious leader in that regard, which is Quantum Eraser, whose very namesake is about the science that overcomes heliocentrism. And there's plenty of information that comes from that particular source, that's Quantum Eraser, for the science that we can be offering. And I do agree with you that there is plenty of interest to be had from an existing flat earther, or perhaps somebody that's now got the nitty-gritty of what the housekeeping questions represent, how the world is not a sphere, how it is absolutely measured flat, and those flat measurements are being utilised to claim it's a sphere. But beyond that, where's the world going? Well, the world's going in the direction we're well aware of at surface level. Our computing technology is expanding at a massive rate in terms of its potential and its capabilities. Every day we get our lives made easier and easier by that exact technology. So in terms of why we have those things bettering our lives on a daily basis, it's because of the current science. And we can directly link that back to Earth not being spherical, Earth being flat. It links directly. It also has a much wider reaching implication in terms of the ontological primitives. That's scientific validity for quantum mechanics, offering proof of God. All of those things we do discuss Anyway, and I'm trying to incorporate this into a segue for housekeeping, although you've just disclaimed it wasn't necessarily off the back of that you were trying to incorporate your answer. You're just saying it's an interesting talking point if we get into the science that can be talked about in this subject field, and there's loads of it.
So not a world view, a world measurement then. So world measurements against world views.
Yeah,
I see.
I don't knock the guy's phraseology. I knew what he was driving at when he's saying it's flat Earth versus globe Earth, and once you know that the result is flat Earth, what's next? You know, if you're already in the circle, you want to know what's next. Now, when I compared it to phonics earlier, there's a conflict, because if I'm going to suggest that it's comparable to a child learning phonics, once they've got beyond a certain stage, they then go on to more advanced understandings and more advanced lessons, leaving us behind. Well, in some ways, you say, well, for the minority that have found out Earth's flat, I say once they've found it out because they've come here and they know damn well it is, because we tell them on a daily basis how it's measured flat, how globe proofs come from flat Earth measurements. Once they know that, they've got a couple of options. Either hang around to refine their own arguments so they can see how those arguments pad out. And from Righteous's perspective, to bring it back onto a nice segue, if we're turning away the audience or turning off the audience in terms of them wanting to come in to debate this subject, that new audience member that still has what I'm calling bloodlust doesn't get to see the arguments thrashed out with a fundy. But what we do see, and this was exemplified earlier by AI, is people going out on other servers and using their adaptations of basically what are housekeeping questions to annihilate the opponents. And as a base at the tip of the spear, yeah, what you're going to hear is going to be the same sharpening sounds over and over again as that blade gets sharper and sharper. But if you want to see how that refinement actually benefits an audience member who comes now rather than a year ago, go and listen to the arguments a year ago and hear how less refined they are. How there's 20 words being used where there's now only 10. And the fact that people want to get housekeeping out the way quickly because it's something they've heard 100 times means that there's an ever greater pressure to refine them more. So, there's pluses and minuses to both, but the biggest conflict comes when you're trying to appeal to an audience that you want to keep, an existing audience, and an audience that you know you can expand into, which is far wider than the existing audience, that needs to know the moment they get here that Earth is measured flat and that the globe is debunked. And the only way to achieve that is through repetition. Any other comments on this? If not, we're going to round out and ask people to stay tuned for the after show. Really? Did that whole spiel just summarize the whole situation in a for dead silence afterwards? I'm fantastic, basically, aren't I? Did I really summarize all of it in that last spiel? Yes, Nathan, you did really well. It was a great note to round out on.
Are you happy with that summary, Righteous?
I was reading the comments. I was reading the chat comments on YouTube. I'm so sorry. I'm sure it was great, Nathan, though.
But partly what the biggest benefit has been summarized by Steve again in the chat, right? So as I round out and ask people to stay tuned, I will just drop this on before I pause the recording for the live stream outro. Excuse me. So it's gone off my screen now. Steve says, Nathan's show forces globe Earth to tap out. And that is absolutely correct. That's the whole purpose of having housekeeping questions, so people appreciate that the globe's tapped out, it's been forced into submission, if you want to phrase it in that analogy. But being tapped out is Righteous's objection. If they're tapped out, they can't be fighting. But there we go. Let's pause the recording and do a proper outro. Excellent. By moaning about the housekeeping questions, you developed a fantastic talking point in doing so, Righteous.
Yeah, it looked like the numbers were pretty good. Like 117, 19 I've seen, I think.
Oh, the live audience. Yeah, almost 120 people watching. You moan about how crap the housekeeping questions were. Thank you for that.
And seems like it got a lot of participation. So from a panel in Discord.
Yeah, and it's I'm all for it. You know, when Anthony brought them up in the first instance, I was all for it. If people want to criticize them and refine them, I'm all for it. Whatever becomes most effective at passing out that message. Passing out our message.
It's a signature thing that you have here. It's unique. You keep it.
I'm not a
Can
big
be more brief.
traditionalist. Because it's traditional to have it doesn't mean I'm going to fight to keep it if it's
I
not needed
understand.
anymore. I think it is
It's unique
needed.
to you. Yeah, of course it's needed.
I think
Keep
so
the
at the moment, but
conversation going.
it doesn't mean I won't let
listen,
people table objections to it, George.
I understand that. But like someone pointed out in the chat there, you know, for someone who comes across the conversation for the first time, to have at least a few housekeeping questions answered, to give them a starting point.
Yeah, but a starting point is just that, isn't it? For somebody who's been here a while, you're like, okay, yeah, we've stood at the beginning of the race holding the pistol and firing the pistol for the starting of the race, you know, every day now, and I'm getting a bit bored of firing the starting pistol.
Somebody made a comparison to Joe
I
Rogan.
understand that. It's not about us, it's about the argument. You shouldn't make this about righteous or me or Nathan. No, it's about the argument on the table. The earth. Reality.
Somebody made
Measurement of reality.
Yeah, I've got to take that YouTube. I've got to put that YouTube hat on and go. No, the audience is still paramount to me.
Somebody made a comparison to Joe Rogan, and like if you think about it with Joe Rogan, what if he had something like housekeeping questions every day? The show wouldn't be as interesting, right?
No, I guess not.
Doesn't anyone want to debate you anymore, or what's going on?
But the problem is, the suggestion is that the housekeeping questions scare off the Globers because they're phrased in such a way that they can't overcome them. And it's a reminder daily that they're not going to win an argument here because they can't win the arguments here, and the arguments that they've got in their arsenal are already overcome, as exemplified by the housekeeping questions. Ergo, it's going to put people off, therefore you don't get to taste the blood, as I'm putting it in an analogy.
It's like coming in and starting the show with a big tank, and they're coming in on their horses.
Yeah, I guess so.
But that would be assuming that there is a debate on the table. There is no more debate. Since 2020, there is no more debate.
It's a nice problem to have. What's the problem, you say? Well, these Globers are facing you flat earthers, and they've got absolutely no way of winning, and it's really obvious that they're going to lose immediately. Oh, how terrible. Imagine if that was the issue 10 years ago. Oh, the problem is we've just got such good arguments, they haven't got anything to stand up on. They won't even come near you because your arguments are so strong. Yeah. Oh, how awful.
I like what Righteous just said, though, right? It's like we got a big tank and coming in on a horse. Well, aren't they the ones who's supposed to have that big tank? That doesn't it like
they do have
shine a light on the illusion that they do have this giant, huge tank that can destroy anyone, like they say they can?
What they've got is they are ants. They are ants in the majority. And the only way to stop the giant tank with a flamethrower, just to wiping all the ants out in one big go, is by stopping the ants from coming. So that's what YouTube have effectively done, isn't it? Just stop the ants going anywhere near, and the ants won't get wiped out. Ergo, there'll always be ants believing that there's a globe, because they're not coming here to get wiped out by us. So while you're saying, well, it's a problem, we should isolate ourselves more and make sure that it's only tailored to the people who already know it's flat. I'm saying, no, we've got to figure out a way of getting to the ants.
Well, that depends. All right, do you want the ants to come because you actually you want the ants to come because you actually want to care for them, give them a little bit of sugar, let them go home and be healthy, or do you just want to roast the ants for the enjoyment of Righteous Force? Now that I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but that's a very interesting point. Are people involved in this community because they want to be involved in a community where they have a up on others and they can use that to say, I'm right, you're wrong? Or are they actually interested? Now, that's people have to answer that for themselves in their own hearts. What is their motivation for being involved with this topic at all? Are they really truth seekers? Or do they just want a paradigm that's now the elite paradigm to where they could say, I have the knowledge, you don't, I win, you lose. That makes me happy, and that's all I care about is my enjoyment.
This ant analogy is very cool because, like, if you're burning the ants will let the queen know that they get burned so they don't come back, you know? So giving them sugar could be like asking them questions of trying to understand their worldview, because their worldview is contaminated with lies. And why? Why has this lie been so long in the human collective consciousness?
Well, it's evolved to where now quote unquote flat earthers are to do it to each other, right? Okay, everyone agrees we don't believe in a globe anymore, let's say, or we know it's not a globe. Now we're all equals. So now we need to factionalize and create where I'm better than you, or I have more knowledge than you, or I have the truth of your truth than you, right? And so you could create spectacles, you could create, the blood and circus, even among people who generally agree, by just finding a singular point of division and harping on it. And then you have to ask, is the reason you're doing that, and every man must answer this for themselves, is the reason you're doing that because you're actually seeking truth, or because you just want that spectacle and you want to be a contender in the spectacle, right? Which one is it? That's up to you to decide when you stare in the mirror at night of your own soul.
It's kind of like what QE is doing to crayon munching flat earthers, turning on to try to educate the community to become a little bit smarter and understanding the true nature. But what is this that we are on is a very interesting question that intrigues me as a flat earther. Like, what are we living on? What is this creation? And that goes into the fundamental of the scientific method, understanding the natural world. And maybe instead of having the talking points over and over again in every show, maybe have a segment of, are there any new inventions? Are there anything new in the scientific studies that we are looking at regarding the torus field, regarding light, regarding computers, or the very reality that we live in, this objective truth we're trying to understand.
And it doesn't even have to be like that. That is a good point, right? We're always curious about that stuff, but it can also be like, what's going on in the FE community as a whole. I remember when Nathan and everybody got together, they used to go on Patricia Steerso. Now, you guys may say whatever about her, but the point is, like, guys like Mark Sargent, he kept with the current events of FE, and I thought that part was interesting when Mark Sargent talked about, like, hey, this is what's going on in FE. And since we are FE guys, we naturally be interested in what's going on in FE and what other FE guys have to say. So there's like a lot of things to talk about in FE. Why just focus on just the housekeeping questions, which are not even addressed for us? They're addressed to them, which aren't even here anymore. I said that one time on another show. And we're not expecting answers to those questions anyways, right? So it's like, what's the point? There's never going to be answers. Like when I ask, is there evidence of this? I'm never going to expect an answer for that. I know there isn't. So why bother?
Well, Righteous, you answered your own question. This is an open panel, right? And regardless of the format, you can join and steer the direction of the show to what you want to talk about, which is exactly what you did. So, in other words, the reason why the show is stale is because people sit and listen and complain rather than show up and make it interesting.
Yeah, I want others to do this job for me, though. So I can sit back and listen.
Friends, we've arrived at the answer. Righteous Force wants everybody else to do all the work while he sits back and enjoys the spoils. All right, problem solved. This community session of helping Righteous Force with his personal demons is over.
Well, I'm sure when Righteous Force is satisfied, everybody else will be satisfied too. Surely everybody thinks like me. But yeah.
Of course.
Well, you said you were thinking the same thing, Chocolate. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about that? About what were you thinking yesterday or so? Like flesh it out a bit more. Because we were talking about housekeeping questions. You're like, whoa, you guys are talking about the same thing I was just thinking about. So what epiphany had you had?
Not more than what I said before. Like I as I was considering our new direction, and I started thinking like one of the shows came on and the housekeeping questions. I'm looking at them as they're scrolling by me, and I'm like, are these things even relevant anymore to an extent? Regarding the way we argue now, like I mean, are these, like, do they have any weight? Forgive the word, but right. And there's a part of me that feels like, yeah, they do, because I think it's the fact that they cannot be answered is the biggest, how should I say it? It's the biggest part of it, right? So for people who think that they live on a magical spinning water ball, who think that there are answers to all of these questions, the fact that they haven't been answered or cannot be answered, especially by the same people who think there are answers, to me, I think that's very significant, right? But at the same time,
yeah, but we do answer
they're
them.
all, yeah, we do. They don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not like there is no answer to this question. It's not the answer that sit on the globe, but they are answerable.
Well, let Chocolate continue. Or was there somebody else wanted to get in after Chocolate? But after Chocolate, not now. But Chocolate. You were going on the other end.
I mean, do you understand what I'm saying? Like it wasn't that complicated. I just found it funny that when I came in, that's what you guys were talking about, because I had the same kind of thoughts in my head the other day. Like, do we even need to ask these questions anymore? But there's a part of me that's kind of, I don't know, split on that. We could, and showing that they are not answerable in a sufficient way is significant. But at the same time, we don't need them, because Earth is measured by, observed,
and I just realized.
navigated. You know what I mean? Go ahead.
And I just realized, I don't know if you said it. Did you say you came this when you were looking back at an older episode?
No, just one of the recent ones. But it was on, and the intro that has the questions scrolling through it. As I'm reading the questions, like the history of all the questions, they kind of go through my head. And I'm thinking, wow, we're really in a different place, right? Because these used to be very significant in addressing the Glober's points, but now it's like, what globe? What? We're not even addressing your points. Like the dude said the other day, why do we have to even? I forgot how you put it. Like, why do we have to address your unsubstantiated claims?
I got you, Chocolate. So for example, the greatest threat to flat earthers today, in an argumentative sense, is somebody coming along and pointing out that there's topography, right, and that ideal flat doesn't exist. Oh wow, that's our problem. Our problem today is that the Earth is so flat that people have to say it's not perfectly flat. I mean, that's where we've come to.
That's a hell of a problem, isn't it? I love how you put it.
Yeah, but coming back to the housekeeping questions are regarding globe claim. We are questioning the globe claim.
Yeah, but
That's a
there's the
conversation on the
caveat now
table.
that
That's
before
when
we said, sorry, buddy.
That's okay.
That's the evolution, bro. The evolution is what Chocolate's saying is we're not questioning the globe claim. Okay. The Earth is what it presents itself to be, right? There's no reason to question the globe claim. The globe claim has to prove itself. We don't have to give them questions, right? So if Nathan adopts the new ethos for himself that I'm confident in knowing that the Earth is flat, right? And so what do I have to prove? Because if you come along to tell me about your paradigm, the first step is to agree that the Earth is flat. And then from there, you start to coordinate your conclusions about other interpretations of the world. But you've already conceded that the realm in which you live is a particular thing. So we all operate from base reality. And from there, we then go on to make all this crazy mumbo jumbo claims about things that don't exist. Right.
Well, therefore, the housekeeping questions are redundant then, because they come after the crazy claims and how they've been overcome. Therefore, they could all be superseded by one question about I forget how you phrased it earlier, but in essence, the question you asked, is there any evidence that Earth isn't measured flat?
Well, to be gracious, I don't use the term measured flat because, I want to be sensitive to people's, particular dysfunctions about understanding of terms. You know what I mean? So to me, I personally wouldn't say that. I would say, maybe parse it out with more diplomatic language. But I mean, that you are correct that that's the base reality of which we all experience, right?
Yeah, that's kind of the reason why I do like saying it. But maybe.
Yeah, I know. I understand.
I understand the controversy that can be discussed within a flat Earth paradigm that must be accepted to discuss that. Therefore, the ambiguity that is offered when you give a descriptive term for a measurement term, I quite like that. I quite like that it leads into a discussion that requires a concession of Earth being flat to even have that discussion take place. That I enjoy. You know what I mean? You and I can you and I could now settle into a discussion about how invalid it is to say Earth's measured flat, and then give a definition that won't let that description comport. But when describing how Earth will be functionally operating and measured, the conclusion of the description that you will use to summarize that, I absolutely assure you, will be one word: flat. Out of interest, what would be your...
I began the show.
I was just going to ask, what would be your diplomatic phraseology, AI? How would you diplomatically phrase it?
I don't know. I tend to have it on a rotation, and so using general terms like you might say
horizontal plane.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. The orientation of the Earth aggregately is parallel to the plane of the horizon. Yeah, I got to say that. That way, well, look, check this out. We're in a woke culture, right? Some people identify in certain ways, so you have to be a little diplomatic, especially since I'm running for president.
Well, the ballers aren't going to understand that. It's going to take them 3 to 4 weeks to figure out what that means.
Okay, let me stop you right there. People who are arguing this pedantic on the Earth's not perfectly flat, I find continuously comments of globers being confused about whether that person is a glober or not. And I think you're onto something, that they don't understand the difference. because it's not clear. If somebody just comes along and says, the Earth's obviously flat, bro, there's no ambiguity there. Like that's yes, it's provocative. Is it absolutely precise to certain dimensional standards of an ideal geometry? Well, of course not. But everyone understands what we mean.
Yeah, that ambiguity is not going to work either. You got to keep them to 1 to 2 syllables max.
Okay, hold on. Earth is hold on. Obviously, no. Let's throw that out. Earth is clearly flat. All right, there we go. That's within the 2-syllable standard.
It's still too complicated. Too many words. Earth flat. Because then you can say it in quite a derogatory tone. Earth flat. You know what I mean?
How about not a ball with a claimed radius of 3959 miles?
No, because that automatically infers there should be a suggestion of a contrapositive claim that it is a ball 3959 miles in radius. Why postulate it?
Well, usually those who are asking the question, how do you know it, or what is flat Earth? And that's how I usually respond, because they're usually coming in to defend its ball with that measured radius, measured somehow by 2 sticks. It's the same argument over and over again.
And I agree. I mean, if they bring it up, I'll point out how their radius was measured off a flat plane. But if it's left to me to bring up, that's kind of where I left off with why the housekeeping questions might be redundant. If we're saying move forward on the front foot, oh, and by the way, any evidence of your ball that we're trying to move away from, that kind of is self-contradictory, isn't it? Maybe someone can drop Anthony Riley a line and ask him. He's not talking to me at the moment.
Come a hell of a long way from the body of science proves R.
Yeah, to asking about R seems redundant now. It's so superfluous to requirements that we don't even need to ask about it. Yeah. What is it, 10 years ago? Science proves R.
Yep. Shout out to Rumpus. Shout out Retracted.
Not just science, the whole body of science.
Yes, the whole body. 2 years later, science doesn't prove anything.
Yeah. 3 years later, don't talk about measurements of anything. Just keep it very vague if we're talking about a globe. Don't talk about anything measured, ever. Did you notice that refracted curvature caught it when Peterson and Bob are talking, and he asks him, well, how did we measure the transit of Venus? And when it comes to actually describing the process, the measurements weren't talked about. The actual process of getting a measurement wasn't involved in the discussion. And refracted curvature's response was, hey, they all seem really gun-shy when it comes to actually talking about the measurements. Of course they are now, right? They don't want to go near actual physical measurements of the world because they're all flat.
Hey, Righteous.
Yeah.
Why is I don't have a soundboard in here? Could you please soundboard me here?
Yes.
Thank you.
What? What's going on? Stop. What's going on? Don't give him a soundboard.
Stop.
Kiwi's getting an upgrade. What?
Does that mean he'll be able to
Nitro?
Does that mean he'll be able to play sound effects into this show? Does that mean he's going to do his 80s disco jockey thing? No, don't give him a soundboard.
80s disco jockey.
Well,
welcome to Cheese FM. Here's your host, Quantum Eraser. Badoing. Wahoo!
Nah. Well, it won't.
If it's Nathan's show and it doesn't want to give you that perm,
I got you. I got you. Okay, fair enough.
No, you can have it.
Okay
He just has to. He just has to soundboard responsibly.
Okay, I'll give it to him.
What?
No, don't do it. Just leave it go. That's fine.
Okay.
I was just wondering why I didn't have it because I'm nitrofied.
Oh, wait.
But you don't like wonderful soundboard soundboard extrapolations like, oh, you have now entered the numpty zone.
That's different. He
No,
uses those
what-
in edit. So when he makes an edited video, he can take his time over considering where those appropriate sound effects will come. And he does a very good job of editing them. But when you do them live, there's a tendency, I don't know if Betty had access to them on your last show, but to just overuse them. There is a place for soundboard effects. And you what? Through the top of things at the right moment. Yeah, that you can. They are useful. It's just a means of playing things, right? It's just a little desk with lots of recorded stuff on it. That's obviously useful if used to good effect. The problem is that people just get over enthusiastic about it, and the next thing you know, all you're listening to for 5 minutes is a string of soundboard effects because they've got so keen on pressing all the buttons to react to everything that happens on the show.
There's only one really good one, and it's QE saying refraction. You guys want to hear it? Can I play it, QE?
It's not the best one, but it's just one.
Oh, it's by far the best one. Here, I'll play it. Just listen for a sec. Yeah, that was. I remember the first time I played it to Betty, she was laughing. But,
Hey, hold on, friends. Let's try an exercise in the questions, right? So Nathan says the questions, the housekeeping questions, right? And then you play a soundboard clip. Right?
Oh,
Am
yeah.
I right or wrong?
Yeah, we
The
could just.
countdown clock.
Yeah, so for example, Nathan might say any evidence that the Earth has a geometric Earth curve edge, formerly known as the horizon. Refraction.
Yeah.
There you go. So the solution
Any
is play soundboard
any
effects.
evidence of a molten, any evidence of a molten iron core. Refraction.
I really don't like the way this is going. I'm definitely going to round out on that note. So a huge, massive, enormous thank you to both Discord and Jeepers Panels for making today's after show possible. And of course, a massive thank you to all of you in either Nathan Oakley 1980 or Nathan Oakley premiering streams for hopefully smashing the super chat, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, joining as a Nathan Oakley 1980 channel member, and all that good stuff. I've been Nathan Oakley, and I will see you all in the next video.
What a lovely day!